Hi, I'm Rob Nagy. I'm a set designer in film and TV. I've been doing it since 2014, and I live in Atlanta. Originally, I'm from Toronto, and then went to lived in Augusta, Chicago, Atlanta, New York, and then 2014 decided to come back to Atlanta, and been here ever since. I've worked on a couple of shows. The most famous show that I've worked on did 3 seasons of Stranger Things, and it was good. It was a lot of fun. It was great to have like this show that, especially season one, a show that you worked on that became incredibly popular. The show that was the most fun, it's called Like a Boss, but it definitely um, it definitely wasn't called that when we did the movie. It was called Limited Partners, and it was kind of supposed to be a different movie, um, but I guess studio meddled or something. But um, that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the production designer on that show, and it was just a fun team.
And before coming to Atlanta to work in film, what were you doing? What industries were you involved in?
So I was an architect. I basically went to Georgia Tech for my master's, and then with the idea that I would work in architecture, kind of worked in Atlanta for a bit, then went up to New York. The recession hit. I was out of work for a good while. Did a little bit of like improv theater up there, which kind of like drove me toward getting into more film production. Then moved back down to Atlanta in 2014, but not really knowing what I would do in film. Just I'm going to go into film. So I actively chose to leave architecture and just do something different.
So interesting. Did you move specifically from New York to Atlanta to work in film? So you moved away from New York to Atlanta to work in film, is that right?
It was more, that was kind of like another incentive. It was also more to, one, to get out of the city, but also like my wife and like both of our parents live nearby, and we were familiar with Atlanta, the lower cost of living. And it was just like, well, she was going to do something else, then I was going to do something else too. And so it seemed like a good excuse to kind of cut our costs of living and then try to jump into another industry, because we were both not super happy with our work lives in New York.
And nothing against New York, but I've known a few people that have moved from New York down to Atlanta and have felt that was a better shift for their lives.
Yeah, it's also, New York is so expensive. It's difficult to, because to make the jump, you have to kind of anticipate making a big pay cut and blah, blah, blah. Like, had I known what I'd known when the recession hit, I would have done it. But at the time I wanted to move, I had a job and everything, and things were good. And so taking like decent income to no income would have been a massive blow in New York. In Atlanta, it's a little bit like not as terrible. Yeah, it was a hustle. Like, I didn't know anybody. I actually took like an intro to like one of these like intro to film kind of like resume classes, because I was like, I don't really know what I want to do. I spoke with some people in New York, and people that were doing like reality stuff, and like, they're like, oh, you can be like you can call it a predator, like a producer, shoot, edit. But then he didn't seem really happy with what he was doing. He was like, yeah, I just do this reality stuff. So then I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I actually didn't realize that my skill set was needed in film. Realized what I wanted to do, and then kind of like worked my network. And I basically found someone who was a friend of a friend, met her for coffee, and she was a set designer leaving the industry. And then she was like, do you really want to do this? She's like, I don't. She was like, I don't like this industry. I'm really like corrupted by it. She wasn't really selling it. We were talking through it, and I was like, I want to just work in film or whatever. She's like, okay, if you want to do it, then I'll email a couple of our coordinators, and I'll try to get you like an art PA job. And that So yeah, we moved down like beginning of 2014. I met with her like a couple months after that, and then it took another couple of months for me to actually get my first gig.
When I first got into the industry, I had a similar story where the first job that I wanted to land in Atlanta was a Christmas feature film. It was like for Hallmark or something. And I had the contact for one of the ADs, sent in my resume, but no response. So I hustled and landed a job as an extra, which isn't terribly hard to do. And for anyone looking to be an extra, I have a video on that. But yeah, I contacted him and was like, hey, I'm going to be on set tomorrow as an extra. I'd love to at least meet you, if not interview you, if you need any future day playing PAs. So that's what I did. And he did interview me, and he did hire me as well. But one of the first things he said was, get out now. I feel like that is a very common thing, when people have been in the film industry for a while. It's just like, it's brutal. And that's so funny that that's a really common trend for people first coming in. But good for, I don't know who your contact was, that set designer that you're referring to, but, despite, any reservations she may have on your behalf, she still, help you make those connections to land that first job. So that's really awesome.
It was great. I mean, it was, like one of those things where she didn't have to do it, but then, she left the industry and she never came back. She went on to, I think it just, just depends on the experience in the show. And, sometimes there's like really negative experiences, and then you just say, oh, I'm done. I don't want to do this. I've been through multiple shows. Some have been great. Some have been just miserable experiences that I definitely wouldn't want to do again. So you kind of like pick and choose who you work with in the future, if you're lucky enough.
I think Atlanta is busy enough that we, have that to our advantage a bit. There's not, one or two art directors or production designers. There's like quite a few that come in and out of town, plus, new ones all the time. So, there's that to our advantage. But yeah, I agree. So a common term that you'll hear in the film industry is like, oh, it's a shit show. It's just, those are the ones that you just have no life. It's just a constant grind and
yeah. Speaking of that, I did a show, the weird thing about the industry is you'll run into people on different shows and you haven't worked with them for a while, or you cross paths or whatever. And I did a show a couple of summers ago. It was a really short gig. And like, somebody, I think she was a buyer. She like came in and recognized me. She had a big smile, and then she like whispered to me, she's like, this is a shit show. And just like walked away. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, and there's little ways to tell. I mean, until you're on the show, honestly. But as you get into it, there's at least certain people that have certain reputations, and you try to avoid those people as much as you can, or go in with eyes wide open on what people have said about what they're like to work with. So there's that element to it too. But sometimes it's just, sometimes what the script calls for is just can be an overwhelming amount of work, or maybe there's not enough money. So, or maybe the locations are spread so far apart, any number of factors can make it really challenging.
Yeah. I mean, I guess sometimes it's unrealistic expectations. In my role, I've come to realize that my position as like a local in Georgia is always in demand. More or less, there's times when it gets a little slow, but there's always, I would say I'm never really like struggling to find something if productions are up and running, right? Past 5 months, that was a different story. I've come across situations where the work is overwhelming, and then they're like, we need to get I've had this happen so many times. We need another set designer. Do you know anybody? I'm like, I don't really know anyone available. And then they call so many people, and then it's like hands are just thrown in the air, and they're like, well, we'll just have to get it done. It's like, okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so it's like there's more work and yet you're the only person that can crank it out. And
Yeah.
did they give you enough time or added time? Probably not.
I mean, there's always weekends, which obviously has to get approved. You'll get switched to like 12s, and I've been on some shows that kind of loosey goosey with the 12. Some have been like really strict 12s, which can get just tiring. They're really long days. Basically, the head of the art department is a production designer who works in conjunction with the director, producers, mostly the director. Sometimes the producers. I've been on shows where the producers are really involved to get the vision down. It's all about the vision, and some are like, some are like very hands-on, some are like micromanagey, some are not. Then right under the production designers, the art director. The art director essentially runs the art department. And also the key contact of the art department to other departments, such as like locations, visual effects, special effects, the AD department, other departments I can't think of, greens, but props, set deck, that kind of thing. And so the art director is involved with predominantly budget and then managing the workflow, managing construction. The art director doesn't draw, just manages the expectations of the production designer and the director to what can actually be built and made, and within the schedule, within the budget, that sort of thing. Under that is an assistant art director, which I'm always confused upon. It's a weird mishmash between an art director and a set designer. But I know that under, like, let's say ADG guidelines, it's direct contact with construction, but then also sourcing materials, any kind of specialty item, hardware, that sort of thing, and just assisting the art director in terms of the work lists and all that stuff per set, tech scout, all that. But then it's also a little bit like a set designer, because some of the assistant art directors I work with have also been modeling and drawing and doing renderings, that sort of thing. So it's like a weird kind of mishmashy thing. So then we have a set designer, that's me. Technically just a drafter, right? But the key between the production designer's vision to what actually gets built, whether it's on stage or whether it's on a location, if it's a plug, that sort of thing, flat. We go back and forth between modeling, rendering, and then I guess technically speaking, anything that gets put out to construction is under our umbrella. So we're basically working with construction hand in hand. Occasionally we'll do some work for set deck. Very occasionally, I have done some work for props, but those are the three departments that we'll kind of work with. Then there's also the graphic designer, who is anything that's any kind of graphic you could possibly think of is produced by a graphic designer, and it's usually a lot. It's usually a very stressful position. The graphic designer is always busy on every show that I've worked on, and generally get to the point where we get multiple set graphic designers trying to keep up with the demands. And it's a lot of last minute stuff. Where set design, it's like a little bit of a lead time. Graphic design is, hey, can we get this can we get this poster printed and mounted and have it run to set in like 2 hours, like they're waiting for you, that kind of thing. And then the other two other positions, the art coordinator, which basically just helps manage the entire art department, and also serves as a liaison between other departments. And then the art PA, who is a person of all trades. And I've seen various different sorts of art PAs, some that are just runners, some that just get lunch. And then others that actually like, produce a lot of work. So it really, for the RPA, it really just depends what you want to get out of it.
Some terms that I heard you saying, if we can just clarify, what's the difference between a plug versus a flat?
Yeah, I mean, a plug is, so let's think of a hallway. So let's say the hallway is really long. And so you want to shorten that, and you put in a plug with some kind of designy thing it's kind of artistic. It's essentially used to like shorten the space, but then also have some kind of impact on for the camera. So that's a plug, and it's within a space, and sometimes it's cut out within some kind of molding or something. A flat would be something that, if you're thinking of a hallway, would be at the end of the hallway. So if there's emptiness at the end of the hallway, you want something there, then you put a flat, and then it's some kind of design or graphic or something. It's kind of an endpoint to your set.
And a common question I feel like I get when someone hears set designer, they think it's what a production designer does. So can you really emphasize like what the difference is between a production designer, who's the head of the art department, and a set designer?
Yeah, I actually get more, not production design, I get more set decorator. Like people think that I'm like a decorator, and I'm like, I'm not a decorator. Like I don't think I would be a very good decorator. But yeah, I mean, the production designer is like the actual look and feel of everything when it comes to like materials, paint, input from set deck, that sort of thing, the actual vision, almost like the concept, right? That's the production design, is the actual concept and look. My job is to take that idea and translate it to some sort of technical thing that can be built. So it's also just the architecture of it. It's like, what is the architecture of this set? What is construction building? And then I work hand in hand with the art director and then set deck to figure out like how they want to dress it, that sort of thing. So it's a set design is something that can be handed off to construction, and they can just run with it without my input. That's basically set design. So it can be a lot of technical drawings, a lot of details, which my architecture background comes in handy.
Yeah, I'm sure that's really handy, with the, moldings and doors and windows, like all those little details make a difference in, the place, the time period. So yeah, I was gonna say, if you want to speak to that a little bit of how, important those details are, and, how much of it gets communicated and translated from the production designer, or how much do you kind of, bring in your own expertise?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the designer. Some are very hands-on. They really want to get involved. Others kind of let you do what you want to do a little bit. They'll give you some guidelines. But yeah, in terms of the details, I mean, details are always important. You kind of want to sell the set as something realistic. Even though there were certain, like, when I watch a film or TV, it's pretty easy to figure out like what's a set, what's not, that sort of thing. But for the average viewer, you want to sell it. And I mean, details are important because what I've learned is whatever you put on the page is whatever gets built. And it's pretty evident in terms of, I think pretty recently I did a movie. It's a big movie. It's coming out. And the production designer was like, oh, these carpenters are so great. Like they come up with these like crazy things. They're so good. I was like, okay, totally. Like, that's fine. So I drew this like built-in cabinet. I wasn't even thinking about it. It was even like kind of like off the screen or whatever. It wasn't like a big deal. And it was a plug, kind of a cabinet thing. And I did these like cabinet doors, and they're just like plantons. It wasn't anything like elaborate. I think I put a note like, put some kind of detail in this. There was no detail. There was just exactly how I drew it and paint it. And I was like, oh my God, that does not look good. um, so it was a lesson for me of like, I just should have just drawn it and been like, no, this is what has, because, the thing about film is everything gets done so quickly that sometimes things just don't get communicated, or there's a little bit of miscommunication. And it always goes back to what I do in terms of the drawing, So yeah, focus on the details. The details, detailing something out can be a fun, interesting task, but it's also, it adds like depth to the set.
Something too that I feel is like, can you quickly or try to quickly explain what are some key differences between, architecture versus film set design? Like in film, we have wild walls. Like, what are some other differences? And can you explain what a wild wall is?
Yeah, the wild wall. Nobody told me what a wild wall is until I started working, and they kept saying wild wall, and I was like, "What are you talking about?" I mean, basically, it's just a wall that you can move away to have camera crew access, and there's all these like camera ports you can come up with. I mean, the biggest difference is that generally speaking, everything in film is made out of pretty combustible materials. Like it's going to be like made out of wood or some kind of foam, and then you have a scenic department that makes it look realistic. Very, very rarely is something made out of steel. I've worked on a couple of sets that have steel, and it's fantastic. It's very structural. It's great. That's the biggest difference. It's really just the materials. And when I started, the first production designer I worked with knew I was an architect and was like, and I was really into like structure and like, how are these things going to be like, like really thinking too much a little bit. And he was like, no, all you care about is the inside edge. That's it. And then whatever's behind it is they'll figure it out. The fun part is that things change quickly. So you have to be very like, you have to make the changes obviously quickly, but then that gets built very fast. Like there's no, film sets get, there's maybe like a 3-week lead time or something, depending, some sets are bigger, but whereas architecture takes a very long time. You're talking about like several years. And then you have not only the structure, but you have all these systems, all these like HVAC systems and plumbing and electrical, and then you have to like make sure it goes through code and goes through the city permits. And so the biggest change is the speed. Set design is fast, and it's also very fulfilling to see what you've done. You've worked on something 3 weeks ago and it's built and it's there and they're going to shoot it. Whereas I worked on projects in architecture and they never get built. And it's just like a fun exercise of like, moving lines around, but it's for no purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like people that are coming on the set for the first time, they don't realize how fake everything is. Like you turn on a faucet, no water is going to come out. Like everything has to be intentional or unintentional for it to work or not. And like little things like certain fridges and microwaves, like there's ways of rigging it so that a camera can get in, like getting those shots when someone opens up a
right.
Appliance store or whatever. And then when you were mentioning the materials, so many times foam is turned into like the most outrageous looking stone or marble, whatever it is, by paint. I'm always amazed at what paint can do. They do a really good job.
Yeah, we did these, the last movie I did, we did these balusters, and it was just like, a 3D model that was CNC'd out of foam, and then it was routed out of foam and then just painted, and there you go. It's there. So there's many ways to solve the problem in film, because it's just visual. It's a visual medium. I have a quick story. So the last movie we were on, it was a really big set. It's like this iconic space in New York that we just didn't have the permit for, and it was also a period show. And so they made the decision to build a set, and it wasn't like, it was maybe a page of script. So it wasn't that, it was a 1-day shoot, and it was just an elaborate set, a lot of detail, incredible detail. You know, I think, man, I think they maybe had 3 weeks, maybe 2 weeks to get it up. And, you know, they shot it. It looked great. And we went to go the next day to take pictures, and they were already in the middle of striking it. Like it was like they finished shooting it that night at 3 a.m. and then just brought in the crew to start striking it. It was crazy. And the set was like $500,000 or something.
It's sad. It can be sad, like how amazing something is, and then all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. Or when you see a set deconstructed, like just all the walls like lined up against one another. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I'm also always amazed at the strike team and how they can organize sets that would have to be built next season or for reshoots. I'm always like, wow, that's good job, guys. You know, I don't think I could do it.
Yeah, well, I know when I was working with a construction coordinator that we know of, he would have me print out the multiple copies of the spotting plan. Or no, he would start off with one and label all the walls. And then they would just stick that plan on the back of all the walls. And then, you know, if it was wall A, then, you know, they would label it as wall A, so that no matter what you were pulling, you knew where in that plan it would go. I feel like set deck has a little bit more challenges when it comes to putting together a set again, because they have, you know, rentals, and they can have rentals in the mix as well. And then just boxes for days. Like if it's not packed right and labeled right, good luck. Okay, so when you first started in the art department, what kind of roles did you have before you became a set designer?
Right. So the very first show I did was a film called Selma. I was hired as an art PA. So the production designer is pretty well known, from New York. So I had an advantage of being from New York. And there was, you know, when I took that class, they talked about like, you know, there's like Hollywood attitude or whatever. I mean, I worked in New York. I know the New York attitude, but he was very much like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring the Hollywood attitude to the city. And yeah, so it was my very first PA gig, and I was mid-career. So I was a little bit like, I don't know if I should be doing this, but I want to work in film. And so it was a weird mix of like me helping a lot with set design, doing a lot of surveying stuff, and then also helping him with a lot of personal things, which like washing his car and driving him around everywhere, that sort of thing. So it was an interesting start, because having done other shows, it was definitely like, oh wow, that was not how it should have really been. But it was a great opportunity because it was a relatively small department, and so there was a lot. It was a period show. There was a lot of stuff to get done. So I was not only helping with set design stuff, but I was like helping to make props and helping with set deck, that sort of thing. So it was an interesting start. And I do remember the first paycheck I got in film, and that was like a proud moment. And I was like, wow, I'm actually getting paid to work in movies. You know, it's like, as I'd done like smaller stuff in New York, but it was always like, you know, help friends out or shoot my own stuff. And it was like super like micro budget stuff. It was never like, oh, I'm actually getting paid to do this. Yeah. So then I went on to another show, and I was the RPA also. And then at the end of the year, I was offered to jump onto a feature as a set designer. And so I made that transition. I don't think they knew that I was in the union. I was just like, yeah, let's do this. And
That was going to be my next question is when did you join the union?
I came recommended from that production designer that I worked with on Selma. So he recommended me to this production designer who was an LA production designer. And it was at a time where I was almost 5 or 6 months into being an RPA. And I had kind of gotten to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can do film. I can't be an RPA anymore because it was weird, like seeing people a position above me, but then kind of being like, I feel I can do that, or I feel like I could do better, and there's no opportunity for me here. So I had made a conscious decision to leave, and I had like already started the process of joining the union, and it was just almost pure luck that I distinctly remember. I think I was like making a run. I was at set. I was like not in a good mood. And then the designer called and I was like, oh man, I'm totally going to leave the show and start set designing. Yeah. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a little bit of serendipity, I guess. Is that the correct term? Yeah.
And when you joined the union, I don't know what the terms are now, but I feel like there's usually a fee involved, and then letter of recommendations. Was that what it was for you?
Yeah, it was 4 letters of recommendation, 2 local, 2 distant. So I had like 2 people I worked with from New York on Selma, and then one was a coordinator, and I think one was, I can't remember, but 2 locals. And then, right, there was a fee. There was also a residency issue, which, I mean, I had just moved down, but I was still like, I had lived in Georgia, was still registered to vote. And so I remember I went to the union office and I was like, I don't know about this residency. They're like, oh, you're fine. Oh, you've been here since like 2004. I'm like, oh yeah, totally. So I kind of bypassed that.
Yeah, I try and advise people that are PAs. So PAs are non-union, and I tell them not to join the union until they feel they're ready. Like for you, that was I have the skills to do union positions. Other people I feel like don't quite know where they want to land, or if they do, maybe they haven't maybe they don't come from an architecture background and they need to learn some skills before they hop into those union positions. So yes, it's nice to move up and get that higher paycheck. And yeah, as a PA, you can get a lot of personal asks, which are not exactly fun. They're not why you want to work in film.
No, I agree. I mean, I'll piggyback. I think you'll know. Like I knew. I was like, I'm good. Like I kind of know what I want to do. I know where I want to go. I think a lot of the times for most PAs, especially those who are younger, who like, let's say started right out of college or something, they still kind of don't know what they want to do. Maybe they don't have like a certain skill set or something. And then, so yeah, I mean, you can PA for like 2-3 years and just figure out what you want. That's fine. And then go for it. I mean, I guess the only kind of cautionary, like, point that I would make is when you get hired, there's not a lot of leeway in terms of making mistakes. It's pretty much like you need to know what you're doing because you can get replaced very fast. And that's just not for, I mean, I think that's any union position, so there's a little bit of learning on the job, but you just have to produce, and otherwise you can just get replaced.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really great tip, and I feel like that's why I try and caution people to like learn what you have to learn before you get into those positions, because if they throw you in the deep end and you don't know how to swim, like that's not good for anyone.
Yeah, and I've heard stories of some like ambitious young set designers who just get burnt out, and yeah, because you have to keep the drawings, you have to keep construction moving. If there's a lag, they're going to figure out why there's a lag, and it could be you.
Yeah, I mean, a construction crew is huge, to keep all those guys on for a day, and if they're brought on, if the schedule is okay, we're wanting to have a planned release so we can start building this set this day, and if that doesn't happen, man, that will definitely cost the company a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So what specific knowledge and tools did you need to learn or acquire to work in, set design? Like, what are the programs that you use? Have you felt that, it sounds like there's definitely a learning curve going from architecture to film, but did you kind of more learn that learning curve on the job? And do you do anything outside of film to keep any knowledge up or, change with any updates that may be happening?
Yeah, I mean, as an architect, I was very comfortable with using AutoCAD, which is just kind of like the drafting software that most companies that I worked with use. I mean, it's all 2D drafting. So there's a difference between 2D drafting and 3D drafting, 3D modeling, that sort of thing. And then I had a somewhat of a reasonable understanding of the program called SketchUp. That was kind of like the other big program. And then so that's your like 3D modeling program, but you can get more advanced in terms of your modeling. Some people use Rhino. There's Fusion, which is also like an Autodesk program. There's a lot of programs. it's a lot. I would just find one that you're comfortable with. And what I do now is I do SketchUp and AutoCAD, depending on the drawing that I'm doing. Mostly SketchUp. I was a SketchUp convert because most production designers or even art directors that I've worked with use it. They'll like fiddle around with something, and then they'll like have something, and then like hand you a SketchUp model, and then they'll want you to do something with it. And it's difficult to translate that into another program. It can happen, it's fine, but then you then have to give it back, or things have to change or whatever. So yeah, those are like the computer software type things. In terms of like the mechanics of the position, that was like different from architecture. I think just like generally speaking, like just the dimensioning was fine, but like like just the size of flats, like that sort of thing. When you draw a plan, like in theory you would have like whatever's interior is your like heavy line, and exterior is your almost like no line. So you're only like you're trying to indicate that whatever's like in profile is what's going to be on set, that kind of thing. So then the crew will know like what needs jacks, that that kind of thing. Wild Walls was was like anything.
Yeah, I think that's everything.
Yeah, Wild Walls, like how you indicate that. A lot of that stuff was like learning on the job. Sometimes I would have an art director teach me. Some were patient, some were not so patient. So yeah, when I was an architect, mostly in New York, a lot of architects know this. There's a little bit of an abuse where what happens is that you're salaried, but then you're an exempt employee, and then they'll just work you forever. You would get burnt out. I mean, I worked at a firm in New York, and it wasn't terrible, but it was definitely to a point where, get into work around 8, you'd maybe leave at 9, and then that was a daily thing. And then, so that's comparable to, like long film hours, but then you would get dragged in on the weekend and you're not getting overtime. You're just working.
Wow.
Wow. And this is to the architects. You've created this mess. You have created this mess, and it is a mess. And it happens. Oh man, it happens a lot in especially like design firms that are like, pushing this like really extravagant design, and they put that burden on you. They're like, oh, you're working here. You should be happy you have a job, and you're just happy you're working here. And, so that was the big change for me, at least in terms of like financially, of having a union behind me, which I thought was great. Because the union would like set a minimum, and then you work your 8 hours, you get your time and a half, and then if they want you to come in on the weekend, there you go, it's time and a half. It's fine. Yeah, I can work on a Saturday, no problem. But then you're not doing it for free. um, which was a huge difference for me.
I can't believe that they didn't pay architects overtime on the weekend. That's crazy.
It happens way too often. I'm not a big fan of the industry. Like they need to, like, there's been a little bit of talk of shaking it up in terms of like getting registered to getting a license, because the way that it is now, getting a license is it's incredibly difficult. Especially when I was in the process of doing it, I was out of work for 3 years. I wasn't working in architecture. And then when that happens, you not only lose skills, but then like you lose track of things. And I was basically kicked to the bottom, to the back of the line. So I was like considered the same as somebody who had just come out of school. So I had to like start my credits again. And then finally I was just like, I give up. I don't want to do this. So there's that, but it's the culture of, we talk about how film has a culture of long hours, that kind of thing. There's a culture of long hours, but there's a culture of doing a lot of like work for free, because it's embedded within like the studio culture. Like when I went to grad school, like people would be working all night. You're just it's all this passion, this design. That's great. I love design. I love it. But it's come to a point where it's almost abuse, and I'm sure it hasn't changed.
I'm glad you got out then.
Yeah.
And you're still able to work your skill as a passion, just in a different industry. So that's good.
Different industry. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we can't quite move on until we talk about Tech Scout.
Oh, okay. Right.
Tech Scout packets are like, that's like the first thing that I feel like one of the first things that our departments put on the calendar of like, when is that Tech Scout? Because we gotta prepare.
So doing the Tech Scout packet for Selma, that was like one of the first things that I did. And so it was me and the assistant art director. On that show, it was a New York team. They didn't have a set designer. It was just assistant art director. And so we split the surveys and then drew everything up. And yeah, it was a process. It's, and he was trying to sell it to me as like, this is something like, she's like, this is so important. Like, this is something that every member of the crew is going to have this, carrying them around with them. And you're going to be like, yeah, I worked on that, that sort of thing. But yeah, they're very important. Basically like a quick kind of diagram of every set, to kind of help like marry the trades. And Tech Scouts are usually pretty fast. I know on Selma I actually went on the Tech Scout for that. I took all the notes because the production designer, I took all the notes for the production designer, and I went to the production meeting. I took all the notes there too. But it was a great learning experience. I enjoyed it. So yeah, I think it was 3 days, and then we had a fourth day in Selma, Alabama, and it's a lot of locations. I don't even remember how many, but it's basically you get there and like, boom, boom, boom. This, do this, and then a lot of it's like, for some people, it's the first time they've been there, and they're just trying to figure out like, what to do. Lighting's like, I don't know what, kind of coordinating with the DP and the director and trying to figure everything out. But yeah, everything is pretty fast. So you have to have that document there that is easily understandable, and then gets used throughout the whole run of the show.
Yes. So real quick, I'm just going to describe what a Tech Scout is. During pre-production on a show, we'll have what's called a Tech Scout, which is where all the department heads will pile in bus or a van or something
A
and
bus.
go, yeah, the short bus usually, uh, and go to all the locations and or stages. And yeah, they'll come with these text out books that have, usually an overhead plan, kind of like a smaller version of a spotting plan. Um, and or it can be a aerial Google Earth view, and then they can mark out, ADs can figure out where base camp is going to go, transpo can figure out where they're going to go. So yeah, it's just an opportunity for everyone to get the lay of the land and then figure out the plans for actually filming the scenes within that space.
So I started writing back in um, back in New York when I was like out of work, and I took like on a whim, I was like, I kind of just want to be a comedy writer or something. And I took this like sketch comedy writing class with who it turns out to be like one of the like preeminent like improv teachers. And it was great. And it kind of, got me going in terms of like writing shorts and that sort of thing. And there are all these like no budget shorts that I was kind of working on, but I kind of got into the problem of always making sketch films. And everyone that I kind of got to help me to, work on these things were all kind of improv or that sort of thing. And there was this like, every idea was like some kind of sketch. And I was trying to figure out a way to get out of it because I don't really want to do sketch comedy. So long story short, I'd been working on a bunch of different short film ideas, nothing really sticking. And then I finally had a kind of a weird concept of like, I kind of wanted to do a short film where somebody was like living in a storage unit. I thought that was interesting because like being like a set designer, like some of the sets don't change. Like they're all, a lot of the sets are, like bedrooms and houses and, lots of bathrooms, but then I thought the idea of like having somebody like live in a storage unit was like this interesting concept, and then trying to figure out like what this person is. So that was kind of like the spark of this idea that kind of became this feature film that I've been working on. And so the film, it's been in the works for over a year. It's been a lot of like world building and just kind of trying to create like, so I had this idea where like these this group of mythical people like lived in these storage units for some reason. And then there's a reason. But then the trick is to try to figure out like, how do I weave a story? And I had different ways. I had like a 2-page feature that was kind of like I was working with, that I outlined a lot. So basically the story is it's a science fiction mystery. It's about a Chinese American woman. I feel like, so my wife is Chinese American. My daughter is half Chinese American. I feel like that protagonist is not, I can't even think of a Chinese American female protagonist aside from like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, which is a fantastic movie. But it's difficult to find. So I thought that was an interesting demographic in terms of like a protagonist. It's about a Chinese American woman who survives an accident, but then she doesn't. She loses her memory. She has no recollection of how she got there, but it's an accident that she should not have survived. And through DNA tracing, they connect her to like a genetics company. Like she is working at this genetics company. So then it's her story of trying to figure out like not only what happened to her, but then what's kind of like where she came from, and then what's going to happen to her. So it involves these people in storage units.
I like it. Well, like I said, it definitely evolves around a demographic or character that we haven't seen often, or very rarely, I'll say. Um, and it's interesting. Okay, so as a male writing for female, like, can you speak to that writing process? Like, do you feel it's challenging? Do you feel you can get into a woman's voice easily, or how do you
No,
feel about that?
it's challenging. I mean, but I maybe picture like how my wife would respond to things, that kind of thing. Um, but I was thinking about it, I'm always like, why am I writing this story? Because because then um, I think because it one, it's unique, but then I look at like Harry Potter, and that was written by like a middle-aged white woman, and like, how does she connect to like a teenage boy? I think it's hard, but I think that's the trick of writing, is to try to really embody the character. But I think it's also less about her identity. And I mean, the identity becomes like a thing in the story, but it's less about her being, let's say, like Chinese, and more about being, an actual being a Chinese American in a story. Like, it's kind of like, um yeah. So it's because I feel like everything I see recently that's like, oh, it's a Chinese American story, it's always like has to revolve around
Around
something
the culture.
Asian, like,
Yeah.
something, there has to be like a justification. But why is it, it's like, I don't know, why is Luke Skywalker a white guy? Why? Like, why is that? So I go back and forth trying to figure out like why this character exists. Also because I know the question comes, why is this? Maybe it's, go ahead.
Well, and it's interesting. Like, I feel like as writers, unless we specifically say, those character, those physical traits, then it's left to interpretation that may not be the way we want to envision it to be. So yeah, I think that's an important thing to put in the writing, those physical descriptors, so that it's portrayals of things that we want to see that have rarely been shown. Um, and yeah, it'll be more in line with your vision at the end of the day.
Yeah, and like, I mean, it's not like I'm writing it for my daughter, but it's like I want my daughter to have something that she can like relate to, or it's, you always try to find connections. And me being like a white guy growing up in the 80s, I had lots of things to connect to, but then I couldn't imagine like, living in a world where like it was completely different, like it was, I couldn't see myself as the protagonist, and I think that's interesting.
Telling stories that revolve around characters that we haven't seen portrayed as often, is that one of your something that sets you apart as a writer, and something that you want to continue to do? Like, what are your main kind of missions as a writer?
I don't know. I mean, I always say you just have to just write a good story. That's always the key. Having unique characters, sure. I mean, I think we live in a vast world, and we can't just pigeonhole ourselves into like one specific type. I have a Hungarian background. I can't think of like Hungarian protagonists in anything. Maybe like Hungarian movies, but like, nothing, nothing, nothing English made. Or yeah. And I think just celebrate uniqueness. I mean, I like the characters that I have in the story are all pretty diverse. Yeah, I enjoy female antagonists. I enjoy that, but you try to like, I'm trying really hard to not make it like too much of a one-dimensional character. It's hard to like kind of create that try to embody like that, try to create like a well-versed character. That's a challenge. you know
Absolutely. And are there any genres that you feel you specialize in? You know, you mentioned doing improv. Like, is there a lot of comedy in your writing?
Yeah, it just happens. It's just comedic. It's just I can't I can't get out of the comedy. So there's always comedy, but I mean, yeah, it's a science fiction mystery. It's but it's definitely comedic undertones. And I'm doing a dark comedy. I
Oh,
love
really?
I love I love good dark comedy. I feel like for me, I can never say I'm doing a comedy. I feel like whatever I did would always be comedic. I could write a horror film; it would be comedic. There would be something, um, like another feature that I have an idea for would be like um, maybe a sports. What is it, like a sports biodrama or something? But it would be something comedic. There's something in it that would make it funny.
Awesome. Do you want to speak to any other goals you have, either as a writer or within the art department?
As a writer, I was gonna bring this up to like other people. I'm taking a class, so like this, and it's like an indie filmmaking class. So it's kind of like I'm drawn to independent film. I feel like a lot of the movies I enjoyed are kind of smaller art house films. So the feature I'm writing is more independent, not definitely not. I mean, trying hard to be independent, trying to like really limit locations, that sort of thing. And I'm kind of like not bummed, but a little bit. I'm a little bit annoyed because I guess this happens. So I'm working on this project. It's been 1 to 2 years, and a project has come out that is somewhat similar.
Oh
And
no.
so it's a little, it's not, in terms of story, I don't think it is. I haven't seen it yet. I'm trying to like wait to finish. So I'm working on the second draft. I'm trying to finish the second draft and then kind of put that to bed and be like, I'm done with the second draft, and then I'll watch it. But world building, it's a little bit similar, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if this is
Oh,
necessarily. So I'm trying to come to terms with because that is a $70 million thing, and being a micro budget is not gonna. I can't compete with that sort of money. Um, the only way would be story.
well, they say every story's been told. It's how you tell it that's
That's
different.
what I was thinking. I was like, didn't Shakespeare write every story?
But
That's
yeah, I hear and if you want to share any about, your writing process, like I'm right there with you of character development, and having interesting and unique characters are so important. And at least in my writing process, like I spend way more time prepping my characters before I actually write anything. And I'm definitely plot driven too. Like I like to have a complicated interwoven plot. So it's like, yes, characters king, but they gotta have an interesting environment, to play in, is how I see it too. So yeah, if you can go into your process a bit, whatever you'd like to share of, how do you start, what do you do to really flesh out any details?
it definitely took a long time. I mean, I've never written a feature before, and it was always this. It was a daunting task. I've always started things. I started a novel, and I started another feature a long time ago. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned in doing those was to actually have a really solid outline and have a very well defined world. So I spent a lot of time, a lot of Word documents, just trying to create characters and create worlds. And like, the world was like, okay, these people, they live in storage units. Like, where do they come from? Like, like, what are they called? That sort of thing. So that was a whole thing. And then trying to like kind of create because I was drawn to like, yeah, like world building, like almost like bigger picture stuff, like, like questions about our existence, that sort of thing. So that was what was driving me to this project. But then I was trying to like kind of weave a story, like, well, okay, how can I interject something into this world? Like, what would disrupt them? Like, what would make them like come out into reality because they're kind of in hiding, that sort of thing. And so it was like, oh, if I had a character who like discovered that they were a part of them or something happened to them, or that's kind of where the accident thing came from. It was like, okay, well, this might make a little bit more sense if there's a little bit of mystery. I almost feel like you need something early on to draw in the viewer, to say, okay, this is interesting. I don't have an answer for this. I want to find out more. Then it's a play of like, as you write, you go back and forth between your outline, and then that always changes, because you come across, and then for me, like I had my wife read the first draft and she had questions. I was like, okay, these are good questions, and then like, okay, this isn't working as well. And, like I need to like, change this. And then I had to do some structural changes. But like you, I'm also interested in like an interwoven plot within like an interesting world that is not too expensive to shoot, which is a trick and a problem.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that you say that, because I feel like, we worked together on Stranger Things, and so often it's like, well, what's in the scripts? Like, financially, especially if you're an independent filmmaker, like, just think carefully about what locations you have. If there's any fight scenes, do you know who to hire and how to make that safe, and what the weapons are? Just is someone flying through the air? I feel like stunts in particular, like I just don't feel like, and someone really challenged me on this, but I feel like as an independent filmmaker, try and steer clear of stunts as much as you can, unless you've enlisted the help of some professionals, because a simple day on set can be has its own dangers, and then when you throw in weapons or choreography, it just escalates things, and you don't have the same resources. And with that, definitely have production insurance, especially in case something happens. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. Of like, when I write, especially where we're both indie filmmakers, like so with my last short, I had another location in there, and another character, and then I just, on my next draft, I rewrote it to get rid of two of those elements, because it's like, as much as you can trim it down, the better. Like I had a weekend to film, or I specifically decided to have a weekend to film, because I didn't want to ask people to take more than a weekend out of their time, or, where we have a foot in indie world and studio world, it's like no one is available except for on the weekends.
Yeah, and this, I feel like it's going to go through a major rewrite, especially with the conflict of the highly produced thing that has a similar idea. And then, like I'm conscious, like it's hard, because like for writing, you're just like, just write what you want, just write it, like, and then, so you do that, but then like you look at it and be like, okay, like, and I was very conscious of like locations and money, and like, what I think can be done, what can be done like maybe cheaply, that kind of thing. But I still like reading it over, I'm like, okay, it's a little too much. So that's too much, so, but like, I feel like the next revision is going to be like probably a major one, to actually, once you put numbers to it and, say, okay, well, I can probably do it with 200,000 or 250, right? That's kind of like, that's what I could do it with. Or, but then if it stays, it's like over $1 million, and that becomes problematic, especially with the way that I'm going. Is I would want it made with basically no name actors. Like it's easier to get something, well, not easier, but it's getting a named actor is very difficult, especially especially now with limited productions being up.
Yeah, before we jump off here, do you want to talk about how that's affected you and the industry as a whole, COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, it's been hasn't been great. I mean, it's just I think trying to think back, it's been about 5 months. I think it was midweek March, like word kind of got out that like the NBA was shutting down. I think it was on like Wednesday, and then so many things were kind of shutting down. And then we worked. I think on that Friday we had heard that other shows were beginning to shut down, and then we were kind of like, well, maybe I don't know, we'll see. And then that Saturday we got an email saying we were shut down. Came in Monday. It was basically just move out day. We just moved out. And it was sad because everyone's, I had been through like a long, brutal recession not that long ago. So I was kind of aware of what I was getting into. I knew it wasn't going to, in my head, it was like, oh, maybe we'll be back. And I was like, I don't know. It's going to be a while. And I think people are just trying to figure out how to start up. I was contacted by, at that point, you're kind of like a free agent. Like I was like, told my team, I'm like, sure, I'll come back. But then, you're technically unemployed. I mean, you'll take a job. Like if you get hired and there are people reaching out and some are doing work from home, but most things weren't starting up in time. And then we only had like 2 weeks of prep when we shut down. So we pushed it to 4 weeks. And so we just started back up this week, and it's been 2 weeks of testing. I've gotten 3 COVID tests, all negative so far. We are working in the office. We have like a special COVID team that is just there to manage COVID. And it's been interesting. Right now, it just feels like it's the same, except everybody wears a mask and washes their hands a lot, and there's plastic barriers up. I mean, I'm optimistic, but then a little bit like, I don't know. I feel like we're going to get shut down again. So, I mean, I am nervous about getting the virus. I haven't taken the antibody test, and I heard that it's not as reliable, but I don't think I've gotten it. I've had like very mild scratchy throats and that kind of thing, but I don't think I've gotten it. So I definitely don't want to get it. So I'm being cautious. I'm being extra cautious. I actually have my own office, and I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. I mean, as you know, I started back this week, and it was, we first got in, everyone's like super, distance. And so on my show, you have to like do this app every day that's like a questionnaire to, confirm that you don't have symptoms, and they give you a thermometer, which is like this little gun looking thing, and it's instant, it's super fast. That's pretty cool. But yeah, I definitely have to wear masks, and I was transitioned to my own office, which is really nice. And then they made me a window that just has like a little slot for handing, whatever back and forth. But yeah, for the jobs that are more physical, that literally don't have an office, I think that's where we're going to see the most challenges, for construction and set dressers, and then, the on-set shooting crew. Yeah, it's like if one of them gets positive, there's so many vectors, and I feel like it definitely will shut down the production for at least 2 weeks, if not, I guess it depends on what everybody's results are at that point. But yeah, I guess the biggest thing is to be careful, take it seriously, wear your mask. For me, I realize, every little piece of paper or pen I touch, I try and, sanitize before and after. So just like, it's a different mindset for sure. Yeah, of like, and then, I realized my first day I got dehydrated almost immediately, like, because where you have something covering your mouth, you don't think to have water as much. Like, and you have to physically be in a safe spot to, take off your mask and have a sip of water. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something to be mindful of as well. And then, they definitely encourage us to take as many breaks as we need, because you can't breathe as well with a mask on. You get hot fast, like all that heat
Yeah.
just stays on your face, and yeah,
So you're working with the mask?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not a big crew yet, but it's only going to get bigger. And we have people coming in our office, and part of my job is maintaining the office flow. So I put up a ton of signs and establish a way for USPS and FedEx to drop their packages on a folding table that we have right outside the office, and then I have them ring a doorbell so that I know that they're out there. But yeah, we're not allowed to have vendors in, or if they do, like, they can only come, in the kind of lobby area. But the very first day, one of the mailing companies, he came in without a mask on, and we're just like, oh god. So
Yeah, I feel it's going to get a little bit lax. Like, I feel like same thing. Everyone's like really strict at first, like, and then I think it's going to like become a little bit lax. I mean, I really believe that maybe next week I'm going to see some person like in the hallway walking without a mask on. And I think it's just going to be like, they forgot, and they're like, oh no,
yeah.
because
No, it's easy. Yeah, that almost happened to me today, because I had my door closed during lunch, and then you get used to like, oh, right, this is normal breathing. And then I go out, and then I quickly remembered, because the person I was looking at it had it on, of course, and I was like, oh, crap, so I put it on real fast. But yeah, it's an adjustment, and we'll see. I mean, the industry is opening back up, so I overall feel good about the guidelines. It definitely varies from studio to studio, and it's gonna depend on the crew to do their part. Cast and crew. I don't really know what the parameters are for cast. I don't have to deal with that.
Oh, for us, they have to get tested 3 times a week,
Yeah,
and they
but
can't
like,
once they're here, they can't leave. They're in Atlanta.
right. I wonder if they're, because I know our COVID guys are specifically staying in a hotel and they're not leaving at all. And as crew, we can't leave during the day. So like, I had a crafty run and it had to be delivery. Like, I couldn't go out and get it, which is fine. But yeah, they just don't want anyone going in or out. Well, awesome. Any other parting comments, especially for someone that's either just graduating or doing what you did of going from one industry and thinking about coming into film because they have translatable, relatable skills?
Just do it, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I'm pretty satisfied with the change. Just have confidence that you have the skill set, or then you'll be able to like learn it quickly. Especially if you start as a PA, you should be fine. But yeah, just have the confidence you can do it. And it's a very different industry than your other standard industries. You're basically your own business, and you go from job to job to job pretty fast.
With that, I feel like some people have approached me that have been art directors in other fields, and I always say to still start off as an art PA. Like, I know they don't want to hear that, but I think it's important to have that industry learning curve. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's good to start. I mean, that's also, I think, I don't think I would have changed how I started out, because I got onto a great team and I was learning all aspects I mean, I just didn't know that much about the art department. I didn't know. And I worked in an industry. Like, I was like mid-career in a design industry, and it was completely different. The biggest thing is the speed. You're not used to the speed. You're not used to the lingo. You're not used to like the vendors and, you know, just the way that things are built on set. You're not used to it. Being an RPA, it kind of, it helps you understand the entire art department a little more than just sitting in a room and drawing all day.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you know a little bit about the bigger picture and what other people do, it helps you to do your job better.
Right. Because on Selma, I was going on tech scouts, went to production meeting, and, you know, like I was like hand in hand with the production designer. Like I haven't done that as a set designer on anything. When I do move up in the department, I kind of know how things are done. I can even like revert back to that. And like, you know, there were some things that production designer told me that I still think about and that I see a design process, you know, but as a set designer, you don't see that. Star as an RPA, it's not an easy job, but it's like you can screw up a lot as an RPA.
Well, and with that, like learn from it. You know,
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah.
I've had some PAs that, you know, embrace the learning process and others are very resistant. And I think when they come from schools that quote unquote train them to say be a head of a department like a production designer, they want to jump to that so quickly. And like you said, there's a learning curve and they're not embracing of that learning curve and doing the job at hand, which may be going out and getting lunch for people. But if you can't be entrusted with the small things, then I know I don't trust that person with larger responsibilities. Be a PA first. Learn the ropes. Like what are some ways that they can get on set designer and art directors or even art coordinators radar? Because, you know, part of my job in prep can be gathering resumes to present to art directors and production designers.
I think it's always best to try to find a personal connection, even if it's a couple of people removed. That is by far your best bet. And you just have to ask. You can find somebody who is in film, but then also probably in the department that you want to be in. That's how I got in. It was a little bit of luck contacting people. I mean, so there's the 479 has a roster of set designers, and you just find it's the IATSE 479 website. You go on full roster, it shows you everybody there, and it's a lot of people. And so you can actually do like personal networking and maybe do a little bit of research on the person. Like when I did season 1 of Stranger Things, I had somebody reach out to me via email because everyone's information is there, and was just like, hey, I saw you set design on this show. I love this show. Can we just like get coffee? I'm really interested in getting into the art department. Sure, that's fine. More than happy to like meet and talk about the show. I love the show. It was fun. And then, right. So that person I actually helped get her name out, and now she's an art coordinator, you know? So that's a way to do it. You know, there's Facebook groups, there's art department Facebook groups, that sort of thing. Sometimes you can look at right. Same thing. You can find art coordinators on the 479 page. And also just make sure you know a little bit about what they've done. Don't just blindly email them, because that's it's a little bit more helpful to at least show a little bit of interest. I also get the emails of people just blindly emailing, and I just like, I don't know. So I would start there. I think that's your best bet of getting into the industry.
Is to find out what's been filming in your area, and then especially with art directors and production designers where they're usually from out of town and they're not in the local union IATSE 479, figure out which ones come into town often. And you can do that by looking up what is filming in your area, and then just looking up the crew on IMDb, and then see who are the recurring names. Because we have, especially in Atlanta, some production designers and art directors that get flown here all the time.
Yeah, all the time, right.
Yeah, reference that same resource of, IATSE 479 has their roster up. You can look people up by their names, positions, email and 100% do your research and drop a personal detail. Because I'm the same. Of like, if someone contacts me and all they do is ask for a job, it shows your work ethic a bit. If you don't do any research on the person that you're contacting, for all you know, they may not be the right person to contact you. Like, you know, if someone's trying to get into set lighting, they shouldn't be contacting me. You know, like just even something little like that. However, if someone does say something specific, like, oh, hey, you know, I saw you worked on, like someone the other day contacted me, oh, hey, I'm another art coordinator. I saw you worked on Stranger Things, and, you know, we're looking to do some clearance and product placement for the 80s. Can I pick your brain about that process, you know, since we did, you know, a ton of that on Stranger Things. So, yeah, just little stuff like that of like being very specific on, you know, what you're looking for, what you're trying to do, and how that specific person can help you. Because if it's too general, I mean,
Yeah.
you're probably not going to get a response.
I will also say that from personal experience, I have had very little luck with like any kind of like networking sessions and I think it's just a function of the industry. Like most people that are working just don't have time to like go.
Yeah, we're not there.
Hang out at a bar and like grab a drink. Like it's very, very few and far between. I mean, I still go whenever this is over, but you know, I still go every once in a while, mostly for like, some of them are like learning sessions, and I usually just go for that. And like, I meet people, but then there's zero chance that I meet a production designer who wants to hire me. Zero. Because it's just, you have a better luck just like going to any random bar, you know, than a networking thing. So I would just be a little cautious about those, because, you know, they're fun, they're good, but like keep the expectations like super low, you know, and be like more adamant about digital networking. You know, we're all virtual now anyway, so
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And then, you know, like that person reached out to you for a cup of coffee or even a phone call, like, yeah, have a very specific call to action, if you will, of like, maybe don't ask for a job right away, because I think part of it is building rapport. It's like, I am way more likely to recommend someone that I've met, got a vibe off of, and if they impress me, then I will, you know, go you know, further, you know, above and beyond than just like, oh, here's a resume I got. Like, I met this person, they, you know, they really impressed me. Please hire them, keep them in mind. And it's interesting of, you know, I've recommended mainly like other coordinators, but recommendations from someone trusted can go a long way.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you can get in with just, you know, start with one and then work your way up to as many people with good reputations in the industry, and you'll do fine. You'll do great.
Reach out. We're human. We're here to help. You know, most of us are like, yeah, just, you know, come on in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob.
Yeah, no problem.